The story begins in a small, quiet coastal town where the salty breeze whispers through weathered cottages, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore is a constant companion. Daniel Harper, a young man with sun-kissed skin and calloused hands from years of working on fishing boats, lives a simple yet content life. His heart belongs to Emily Carter, his childhood sweetheart, whose laughter lights up even the darkest corners of their little seaside community. Together, they dream of building a future filled with love, adventure, and shared moments under the vast ocean sky. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in hues of orange and purple, Daniel prepared for what he thought would be just another routine trip out to check their lobster traps. The forecast had mentioned light winds, nothing unusual for this time of year. But Emily, who rarely joined him on these trips, insisted on coming along that night. She wanted to see the stars reflected in the water, she said, something they hadn't done together in ages. Though hesitant, Daniel always worried about her safety. He couldn't resist her pleading smile. With a sigh, he agreed, thinking it was harmless enough. As they set sail, the ocean seemed calm, almost serene. They talked about old memories, laughed at inside jokes, and teased each other like they used to when they were kids. For a while, everything felt perfect. But nature has its own unpredictable ways. Without warning, dark clouds rolled in, swallowing the moonlight and turning the gentle waves into angry swells. The wind howled fiercely, whipping the boat back and forth. Panic set in as Daniel fought to keep control, shouting instructions. Over the chaos, Emily clung to the railing, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to head back," she screamed, but the storm only grew worse. Suddenly, a monstrous wave rose above them, towering like a wall before crashing down with terrifying force. The boat flipped instantly, throwing both of them into the icy, churning water. Daniel surfaced gasping for air, desperately searching for Emily amidst the debris. He called her name again and again, his voice raw with desperation, but there was no response. The current pulled him further away, leaving him helpless as the darkness swallowed her whole. For hours, Daniel battled exhaustion and despair, clinging to floating pieces of the wreckage until the Coast Guard finally found him. When they pulled him aboard, soaked and shivering, all he could do was whisper her name. Back on land, the search team scoured the waters day and night, but Emily was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and hope slowly faded. Daniel blamed himself relentlessly, replaying every decision that led to that fateful night. Why had he let her come? Why hadn't he been stronger, faster, smarter? Unable to face the reminders of his failure, Daniel left the sea behind forever, sold his fishing gear, avoided the docks, and threw himself into learning how to fly planes instead. Up in the sky, far above the treacherous waves, he found some semblance of peace. Yet despite the distance he put between himself and the ocean, the guilt never truly left him. Every sunset reminded him of her smile. Every gust of wind carried echoes of her laugh. 11 long years passed, but not a single day went by without Daniel wondering if Emily might still be out there somewhere, waiting for him to find her. 11 years had passed since that devastating night, but for Daniel Harper it felt like a lifetime. The once young fisherman with dreams of a happy future was now a seasoned pilot, navigating the skies instead of the seas. His life had taken a completely different direction after losing Emily, yet her memory lingered in every corner of his existence. Though he tried to bury the pain beneath layers of routine and responsibility, it always found its way back to him, especially during quiet moments when there was nothing but the hum of the plane's engine to keep him company. Daniel's new career as a cargo pilot suited him well, or so everyone thought. To his colleagues, he seemed competent and dependable, someone who could handle any challenge without complaint. But those who worked closely with him noticed something else. A distant look in his eyes whenever they talked about family or vacations, an awkward silence when conversations turned personal. They chalked it up to his reserved nature, never suspecting the storm of emotions raging inside him. What they didn't know was that Daniel carried a weight no one could see, a constant ache for the girl he lost and the guilt that refused to fade. His apartment was sparse, almost impersonal, except for one drawer hidden away in his desk. Inside, carefully tucked beneath old maps and flight manuals, lay a small wooden box containing photographs and mementos from his past life. There were pictures of him and Emily standing on the docks, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. A seashell she had pressed into his hand on their first date sat beside a faded ticket stub from a movie they'd watched together. These items were sacred to him, fragments of a world he could never return to but couldn't let go of either. On nights when insomnia crept in, Daniel would sit by the window, staring out at the stars. He imagined what Emily might have been doing if she were still alive. Whether she'd be married, traveling, or maybe even raising children. Sometimes he wondered if she ever thought about him too, wherever she was. The questions haunted him, endlessly, gnawing at his mind until exhaustion finally claimed him. Even then, his dreams often brought him back to the sea, where he relived that fateful storm over and over again, waking up drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Despite the emptiness inside, Daniel forced himself to move forward. Flying became his escape, a way to outrun the ghosts of his past. High above the clouds, he felt untouchable, free from the pull of memories that dragged him down. Yet, even here, reminders of Emily followed him. Once, while delivering supplies to a remote island community, he saw a young woman walking along the beach, her silhouette eerily similar to hers. For a moment, his heart stopped, and he circled the area twice before realizing it wasn't her. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it wouldn't be the last. Work kept him busy enough to avoid dwelling too much on his loss. Each flight took him to unfamiliar places, introducing him to strangers whose lives seemed so full of purpose compared to his own. Still, no matter how many miles he covered or how many destinations he reached, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that part of him was missing. He told himself repeatedly that moving on was the only option, that clinging to the past wouldn't bring Emily back. Deep down, though, he knew he wasn't ready to let go. Not entirely. As the years rolled by, Daniel began to accept that closure might never come. Some wounds simply don't heal. They scar over but remain tender beneath the surface. All he could do was keep flying, keep searching. For what, he wasn't sure. Maybe answers. Maybe peace. Or maybe, just maybe, a miracle that would rewrite the story of that terrible night and give him another chance to make things right. Until then, he flew alone, carrying the weight of his love and regret across endless skies. One crisp morning, as Daniel prepared for yet another routine flight, he received an assignment that felt different from the usual deliveries. His supervisor handed him a set of coordinates and explained that the mission was to drop off supplies to a research team stationed near an uncharted region of the Pacific Ocean. The details were vague, something about studying marine life and geological formations, but Daniel didn't ask too many questions. He was used to flying into remote areas, often with little information beyond what was necessary to complete the job. As he climbed into the cockpit of his seaplane, Daniel noticed something unusual. The air seemed heavier than usual, charged with an odd energy. The sky above was clear, but there was a strange tension in the atmosphere, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Shaking off the feeling, he started the engine and took off, soaring high above the endless expanse of blue below. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. The ocean stretched out beneath him, shimmering under the sunlight like a sheet of glass. But then, without warning, things began to change. Static crackled through his radio, cutting off communication with ground control. At first, Daniel thought it might be interference from a passing storm, but the weather around him remained calm. Then came the navigation system failure, a sudden, inexplicable glitch that left him relying solely on his compass and instincts. Frustrated but determined, he scanned the horizon for any landmarks that could guide him back on course. It was during this tense moment that he spotted it, a tiny, isolated island rising from the water like a forgotten secret. It wasn't marked on any map or chart he'd ever seen, and yet there it was, lush and green, almost glowing against the deep blue of the ocean. Something about it called to him, stirring a sense of familiarity he couldn't explain. Was it curiosity? Or perhaps some deeper pull? buried in the recesses of his subconscious. Whatever it was, Daniel felt compelled to investigate further. He circled the island once, taking in its peculiar features. Towering cliffs lined parts of the coastline, while dense forests blanketed the interior. Strange rock formations jutted out from the landscape, their shapes oddly symmetrical, as though carved by human hands. Despite its beauty, there was an eerie quality to the place, a stillness that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Yet Daniel pushed aside his unease. After all, he had spent years mastering the art of staying calm under pressure. Lowering the plane carefully, he landed on the tranquil waters surrounding the island. As the seaplane glided to a stop, he cut the engine and sat in silence, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull. For a moment, he debated turning back. The mission could wait, and this detour wasn't part of the plan. But something inside him refused to leave. Maybe it was the thrill of discovery, or maybe it was the faint hope that this mysterious place held answers to questions he hadn't dared to ask. Steeling himself, Daniel grabbed a small backpack, loaded it with essentials, and stepped onto the pontoon. The air smelled sweet, tinged with the scent of blooming flowers and salt water. Taking a deep breath, he climbed onto the island's shore, his boots sinking slightly into the soft sand. As he stood there gazing at the surreal scenery before him, a single thought crossed his mind. What have I stumbled upon? Little did he know this decision would lead him down a path he could never have imagined, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, time, and love. As Daniel stepped further onto the island, he felt an undeniable sense of wonder mixed with unease. The air was thick with a strange stillness, as though the world itself had paused just for him. Every step he took seemed to echo faintly, even though the ground beneath his boots was soft and sandy. The colors around him were impossibly vibrant. The leaves of the trees shimmered like emeralds, and flowers in hues he couldn't name swayed gently in a breeze he couldn't feel. It was beautiful, yes, but there was something otherworldly about it that made his skin prickle. He began exploring cautiously, his eyes scanning the landscape for any signs of life or clues about this mysterious place. At first, all he saw were towering cliffs draped in vines, moss-covered rocks scattered along the shoreline, and dense forests stretching endlessly into the distance. But as he ventured deeper inland, he noticed something unusual, traces of human activity. A narrow path wound through the undergrowth, too deliberate to be natural. Following it, Daniel discovered what appeared to be a crude shelter tucked beneath the shade of ancient trees. The structure was simple, made from driftwood, seaweed, and large palm fronds, but it was unmistakably man-made. Curiosity tugged at him as he approached, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, he found remnants of someone's survival efforts, piles of dried seaweed used as bedding, makeshift tools crafted from shells and stones, and containers fashioned out of hollowed-out coconuts. It looked like whoever lived here had been resourceful, determined to endure despite the odds. But it wasn't until Daniel spotted a small wooden box sitting on a flat rock that his breath caught in his throat. The box was weathered but intact, its lid slightly ajar. With trembling hands, he opened it and froze. Inside lay a locket, a delicate silver chain holding a tiny oval frame. His pulse quickened as he picked it up and examined it closely. Engraved on the back were the initials EC. Daniel's mind raced as he fumbled to open the locket. When it finally clicked open, his knees nearly gave way. There, staring back at him, was a photograph of Emily, her bright smile frozen in time, and himself, standing beside her with his arm wrapped around her shoulders. He remembered the day vividly. They'd taken that picture during a summer festival in their hometown. It was one of his favorites, a snapshot of happiness, before everything changed. For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. His thoughts spiraled, chaotically. How could this be? Was it some cruel trick? Or was it possible? He shook his head, trying to steady himself. This had to mean something. Someone, or something, had brought Emily here. But how? And why now? As he stood there, Clutching the locket tightly in his hand, Daniel became aware of another presence nearby. The rustle of leaves behind him broke the silence, followed by the sound of footsteps crunching softly against the earth. His heart leapt into his chest as he turned slowly, half expecting to see nothing more than a curious animal. Instead, he froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. Standing there, framed by the golden light filtering through the trees, was Emily. She looked exactly as she had 11 years ago, young, radiant, and achingly familiar. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her wide eyes mirrored his shock. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Time itself seemed to stop as they stared at each other, unsure if this was real or a dream. Finally, Daniel managed to choke out her name. "Emily?" His voice cracked with emotion, barely above a whisper. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded, her lips trembling. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of joy and disbelief. In that instant, the impossible became reality. 11 years of longing, guilt, and unanswered questions melted away, replaced by a flood of emotions too powerful to contain. Daniel dropped the locket and ran toward her, pulling her into his arms as though afraid she might vanish if he let go. They held each other tightly, crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by the miracle of being reunited after so many years. In that moment, none of the mysteries surrounding the island mattered. All that mattered was that Emily was alive, and, somehow against all odds, they had found each other again. As their initial shock began to settle, Daniel and Emily sat together on the soft sand near the shelter, their hands clasped tightly as if afraid to let go. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, taking in every detail, reassuring themselves that this wasn't a dream. Tears still streamed down Emily's face, but her smile was radiant, lighting up the dim forest around them. Daniel couldn't stop touching her shoulder, her hair, her hand, anything, to confirm she was real. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "I can't believe it's you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I thought I'd never see you again." Daniel shook his head, his own voice thick with tears. "I don't understand how. I mean, after all these years." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Instead, he asked the question burning in his mind. "How did you survive? What happened after the storm?" Emily took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the ground for a moment before meeting his eyes again. She began to recount her story, speaking slowly as if trying to piece together fragments of memory. After being swept away by the massive wave, she had lost consciousness only to wake up hours later on the shore of this very island. Bruised and disoriented, she had no idea where she was or how far the current had carried her. The island seemed deserted with no signs of human life anywhere. "At first, I thought I wouldn't make it," Emily admitted, her voice steady now. "But there was something about this place. Something strange yet comforting. I found fresh water in a stream, fruits growing wild, and fish in the shallow pools along the coast. It was like the island wanted me to stay." Daniel listened intently, his brow furrowed. "But why didn't anyone find you?" he asked. "Search teams looked everywhere after the storm." Emily hesitated, glancing toward the dense forest behind them. "That's the thing," she said quietly. "No one ever came close. Not once in 11 years. And even when I tried signaling for help, building fires, using rocks to spell messages, it was like the island hid me from the outside world." Her words sent a chill down Daniel's spine, but Emily wasn't finished. She explained that over time she noticed peculiar things about the island. Days blended together in ways that made no sense. Sometimes weeks felt like days. Other times, mere hours stretched endlessly. Her appearance never changed. No wrinkles, no gray hairs, not even scars from injuries she sustained during her early days stranded there. At first she thought she was imagining it, but eventually she accepted the truth. The island existed outside normal time. "It's like it froze me," she said, her tone both awed and fearful. "I don't know why or how, but I stopped aging. I think the island protected me, or maybe trapped me, I'm not sure which. Daniel struggled to process what she was saying. It sounded impossible, fantastical even, but looking at her unchanged face and hearing the sincerity in her voice, he couldn't dismiss it. "And you've been here alone all this time?" he asked, his heart breaking anew at the thought of her isolation. Emily nodded. "Mostly. There were moments when I felt like I wasn't completely alone, like someone or something was watching over me. Sometimes I'd hear whispers in the wind or see glowing lights moving through the trees at night, but whenever I followed them, they disappeared." She paused, then added softly, "I think the island has its own secrets. Secrets I'll probably never fully understand." Daniel reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out together. Whatever this place is, we'll leave it behind. You're coming home with me." Emily's expression softened, but doubt lingered in her eyes. "What if I can't leave?" she whispered. "What if leaving breaks whatever magic kept me alive all these years?" The weight of her words hung heavy between them. Neither of them had answers, but Daniel refused to give up hope. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," he said. "For now, just trust me. Please." Emily studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Trust was something she'd always given him freely, even in their darkest moments. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, brushing sand off her clothes. "All right," she said, determination replacing the fear in her voice. "Let's do this." Together they began gathering supplies from the shelter, preparing for the journey ahead. As they worked side by side, Daniel marveled at the surreal nature of it all. 11 years ago he had lost her to the sea. Now, against all odds, fate had brought them back together on an island that defied logic. Whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: he would do everything in his power to bring Emily home, even if it meant facing the unknown. With their supplies packed and a plan forming in his mind, Daniel led Emily back toward the seaplane. The journey through the dense forest felt surreal, as if the island itself was reluctant to let them go. Every step they took seemed heavier than the last, the air thick with an almost palpable resistance. Birds that had been chirping cheerfully moments before fell silent, and the gentle breeze that once carried the scent of blooming flowers now turned cold and biting. Emily glanced around nervously, clutching Daniel's arm tighter. "Do you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Daniel nodded but didn't stop walking. He could sense it too. The island wasn't just a place. It was alive, watching, testing their resolve. "Stay close," he murmured, trying to sound more confident than he felt. His mind raced with questions. Was the island angry, or was it simply unwilling to release what it had claimed so long ago? Either way, there was no turning back now. When they finally reached the shoreline, the sight of the seaplane waiting patiently on the calm water brought a wave of relief. But as they approached, the weather shifted abruptly. Dark clouds rolled in from nowhere, swallowing the clear blue sky. The wind picked up, whipping the waves into frothy chaos. Lightning crackled, in the distance illuminating the eerie glow of the island's towering cliffs. It was as though nature itself had conspired to keep them stranded. "This isn't normal," Emily said, her voice tinged with panic. "It's like the island doesn't want us to leave." "We're leaving," Daniel replied firmly, his jaw set with determination. He helped her onto the pontoon and climbed aboard after her, quickly starting the engine. The plane shuddered against the rising winds, struggling to stay steady in the turbulent water. For a moment, Daniel feared they wouldn't make it. The storm was intensifying too fast, the waves crashing violently against the hull. But then, something extraordinary happened. As the plane began to move forward, the glowing orbs Emily had described earlier appeared in the sky above them, hovering like silent guardians. They pulsed softly, casting an ethereal light over the scene below. It was both beautiful and unnerving, as if the island was bidding them farewell or issuing a warning. "Hold on," Daniel shouted, gripping the controls tightly. With one Final burst of effort. He guided the plane through the churning waters and into the air. As they ascended, the storm seemed to dissolve behind them, replaced by the serene expanse of the open ocean. Below, the island disappeared into thick fog, vanishing as suddenly as it had revealed itself. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They sat side by side in stunned silence, staring out at the endless horizon ahead. Finally, Emily broke the quiet. "Do you think we'll ever see it again?" she asked softly, her eyes reflecting a mix of wonder and sadness. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, glancing at her. "But I do know this: we made it out together. That's all that matters." As the plane cruised smoothly through the sky, Emily leaned back in her seat, gazing out the window. Her thoughts drifted to everything she had left behind. The strange beauty of the island, its mysteries, and the way it had sheltered her for so many years. Part of her felt grateful, even protective of the place that had saved her life. Another part couldn't shake the feeling that they had escaped something far greater than either of them understood. "What happens now?" she asked, turning to Daniel. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Now, we start over. Together." The words hung in the air, carrying the weight of promise and hope. 11 years apart had changed them both, but their bond remained unshaken. Whatever challenges awaited them beyond the horizon, they would face them side by side. And though the island and its secrets was gone, its impact lingered, etched into their hearts forever. When Daniel and Emily finally landed back on the mainland, they stepped into a world that felt both familiar and foreign to her. For Daniel, it was just another day in civilization, but for Emily, everything was overwhelming. The bustling streets, towering buildings, and constant hum of activity were a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of the island. She clung to Daniel's arm as they walked, her wide eyes taking in every detail: the neon signs, cars speeding past, people glued to their phones. It was as if she had stepped into the future, and in many ways she had. Their first stop was Emily's childhood home, where her parents still lived. Daniel called ahead to prepare them, though he struggled to find the right words to explain what had happened. When they arrived, the reunion was nothing short of miraculous. Emily's mother opened the door, froze in disbelief, and then collapsed into tears, pulling her daughter into a desperate embrace. Her father stood behind her, his face pale with shock before breaking down himself. For hours they sat together in the living room, sharing stories, crying, laughing, and marveling at the impossible turn of events. But not everyone reacted with pure joy. News of Emily's return spread quickly through the small coastal town, drawing crowds of curious neighbors and reporters eager to hear her story. Some celebrated her survival as a miracle. Others whispered theories about hoaxes or hidden motives. Scientists and researchers soon became involved, fascinated by the idea of an island existing outside normal time. They bombarded Emily with questions. How did you survive? What did the island look like? Can you lead us back there? At first, Emily tried to cooperate, answering their questions patiently and describing the island's strange beauty and peculiar phenomena. But as days turned into weeks, the attention grew exhausting. She found herself struggling to adjust to modern life. Simple things like using a smartphone or understanding online banking baffled her. Shopping malls overwhelmed her senses, and loud noises made her flinch. Worst of all, she couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her didn't belong in this world anymore. Daniel noticed her struggles and did his best to support her. He helped her navigate daily tasks, shielded her from intrusive media requests, and reminded her to take things one step at a time. Yet, even he could see the toll it was taking on her. Late at night, when they sat alone in his apartment, Emily would stare out the window, lost in thought. "Do you think I'll ever feel normal again?" she asked him once, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "You will," Daniel assured her, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. "It'll take time, but we'll figure it out together." Despite the challenges, there were moments of happiness too. Emily reconnected with old friends who welcomed her back with open arms. She marveled at advancements in technology, giggling uncontrollably the first time she used a video call to speak with Daniel while he was away on a flight. Slowly, she began finding her footing, rediscovering pieces of the life she'd left behind. Still, the question lingered. What had happened to the island? Both Daniel and Emily wanted answers, so they decided to attempt a return trip. Armed with coordinates recorded during their escape, they led a team of scientists and explorers back to the location. Helicopters circled overhead, boats scoured the waters below, and sonar equipment scanned the depths. But no matter how hard they searched, the island was nowhere to be found. All that remained was endless ocean, stretching out in every direction. Standing on the deck of the research vessel, Emily felt a pang of loss. The island had been her prison, yes, but it had also been her sanctuary, a place that defied logic, yet somehow kept her alive. Now, it was gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the waves in hues of gold and crimson, she turned to Daniel and smiled faintly. "Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved," she said softly. "All that matters is we're here now, together." And, for the first time since returning, Emily realized she didn't need the island or its secrets to move forward. With Daniel by her side, she was ready to embrace whatever came next, however uncertain it might be. Back in the real world, Emily and Daniel began piecing together a new life, one that balanced the weight of their past with the promise of the future. For Emily, it wasn't easy. The transition from an isolated island to a bustling modern society was jarring, and some days felt like climbing an endless mountain. She often found herself overwhelmed by the noise, the pace, and the sheer complexity of a world that had moved on without her. But Daniel was always there, patient and steady, helping her navigate each challenge. They rented a small house near the coast, close enough to hear the waves but far enough to avoid painful reminders of the storm that once tore them apart. Emily spent her days exploring this unfamiliar reality, learning how to use computers, understanding currency changes, and marveling at innovations she'd never dreamed of. Yet, despite these efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that part of her still belonged elsewhere. It wasn't regret or longing for the island. Rather, it was a quiet acknowledgement that her time there had changed her in ways she might never fully understand. The scientific community remained fascinated by her story, though their expeditions yielded no trace of the mysterious island. Without concrete evidence, many dismissed it as a myth or psychological phenomenon. Some even suggested Emily's survival was due to extreme resilience rather than anything supernatural. While frustrating, Emily chose not to argue. She knew what she had experienced, and she didn't need validation from others. Instead, she focused on building a life worth living, a life intertwined with Daniel's. As months passed, they fell into a rhythm. Mornings were peaceful, filled with coffee and quiet conversations. Evenings brought long walks along the beach, where they talked about everything and nothing. Sometimes they'd sit side by side watching the sun dip below the horizon and wonder aloud about the island. Was it truly gone? Had it been a figment of their imagination? Or had it served its purpose by bringing them back together? One evening, as they strolled hand in hand along the shore, Emily stopped suddenly and bent down to pick up something shiny half buried in the sand. It was a seashell, perfectly intact, its surface shimmering faintly under the moonlight. She turned it over in her hands, a soft smile spreading across her face. "It's beautiful," she said, holding it out for Daniel to see. He chuckled. "Just another ordinary shell." "No," Emily replied softly, shaking her head. "It's special, like us." Her words lingered between them, carrying a deeper meaning neither needed to explain. Life hadn't given them ordinary paths. Theirs was a journey marked by lost miracles and second chances, and while they might never have all the answers, they had each other, and that was enough. Over time, Emily embraced her role as a symbol of hope for those who heard her story. Families grieving, lost loved ones reached out to thank her, saying, her survival gave them faith that anything was possible. Though humbled, Emily preferred to live quietly, focusing on the simple joys, gardening, painting, and spending time with Daniel. Together, they started volunteering at a local marine conservation center, finding solace in protecting the ocean that had both taken and returned so much. Years later, when asked about the island, Emily would simply say, "Some places exist beyond maps and logic. They shape us in ways we can't explain, then fade away when their work is done." Her answer left room for interpretation, sparking curiosity and wonder in those who listened. But for Emily and Daniel, the truth was clear. The island had brought them back together, defying time and reason to rewrite their story. In the end, they chose not to dwell on unanswered questions. Instead, they cherished every moment, knowing how fragile and fleeting life could be. Whether walking along the beach, flying through the skies, or sitting quietly in each other's company, they carried the memory of the island, not as a mystery to solve, but as a reminder of love's enduring power. Whatever magic had guided them through the impossible, it had given them a gift greater than any explanation, a lifetime to rebuild, reconnect, and rediscover what it meant to truly live.